Hello everyone and welcome to another Middlegame episode focusing on passed pawns with Coach B from SHS.com. In today's video, we're going to take a look at a second type of useless passed pawn. To do that, we're going to analyze a game played in 2007 between Vasily Ivanchuk, rated 2787, versus Peter Leko, rated 2755. And I'm just going to fast forward through the moves and stop at the critical moments of this game. And this is the position that was reached after 18 moves. If we analyze this position, we could see that this position looks very promising for white. His pieces are more active than black's. We could see that white has both minors developed and also the rooks are connected, while black only has the knight developed and he still needs to connect his rooks. White also has a healthier pawn structure where there are no doubled pawns, while black has double pawns on the c-file. And also white has dynamic potential later in the game with the pawn push from f4 to f5, which will allow him to get a far advanced passed pawn via e5 to e6, but even create threats against the king, moving the pawn from f5 to f6. Black, noticing that, plays an excellent next move, pawn to f5. And now, on the first glance, this might look like a mistake. We could see that now white has a protected passed pawn on e5, which is very dangerous for the endgame, especially that he has a pawn majority on the right side with 4 versus 3. However, if we look at this a little bit more deeper, we could see that this will stop white's dynamic plan of moving the pawn from f4 to f5, and now the knight has to move. After the next move, knight to g3, black makes another excellent move, bishop to e6, blocking that passed pawn. Now, coming back, I do want to mention that the only other options that white has is moving the knight to g5 or to c5, but both of those moves can be easily met by black. First of all, if white moves the knight to g5, black can respond with pawn to h6. After something like queen to h5, attacking black's knight on g6, black can respond with knight takes f4, attacking the queen. White can respond with rook takes f4, and now h takes g5, but black is slightly better. White's rook on f4 is attacked, which will have to move, allowing the pawn on the f-file to move forward, giving more activity to the black bishop, and black is slightly better. Coming back, we looked at moving the knight to g5. If instead white tries moving the knight to c5, threatening to take the pawn on b7, because if black captures black with the bishop, white has an excellent move, queen to b3, forking the king and picking up the bishop. However, black can stop this as well, moving the rook to b8. After something like pawn to b4, black can respond with pawn to b6, attacking the knight. After knight to b3, queen takes b4, let's say queen takes c6, and now queen to e7 with an equal game. Coming back, after knight to c5, rook to b8, we looked at white moving the pawn to b4. Another variation could be moving the queen to b3 check right away. This can be met with queen to f7, after something like bishop to e3, pawn to b6. Here, white can simply move the rook to d2. Black cannot capture the knight as the queen will pick up the rook. So here, black can respond by taking the queen on b3. After knight takes b3, pawn to c5, and black is okay. So coming back to move 18 after pawn to f5 and knight to g3, black responded with bishop to e6. And now, white's passed pawn is more of a traitor. And there's a few reasons for this. We've already mentioned that white cannot play a dynamic game no more, pushing the pawn to f5, and then the king side is blocked. White's bishop on d4 is also blocked by the pawn on e5, limiting its activity and usefulness. The passed pawn also takes away the e5 square, which could be used actively by white's minor pieces. And also, this pawn blocks the e-file. Now, black's bishop is very comfortable on e6, where it cannot be attacked, and it's also very active, attacking the queen side, where black has a pawn majority. Even though he has the double c-pawns, if those start marching forward with the help of the bishop and the rooks, he might be able to fight for his own passed pawn and for an advantage. And the only file that could potentially be used for an attack with the rooks is the d-files, but both sides can take use of that file. So looking at all of this, we could see that black here should definitely play on the queen side, while white should fight in the center and also try to prevent black's queenside play. So the game continued with pawn to b3. If you appreciate my content, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, as that will help me out. Now let's get back to the video. Black responded with rook a to d8, and now pawn to c4. This prevents black's bishop moving to d5, and it also prevents black's double pawn on c6 from marching forward to potentially trade it. From here, the game continued with rook to d7, white respond with rook to d2, tried to take control of the d file, rook e to d8, and rook f to d1. After this, black responds with pawn to a5, knight to e2, and now pawn to c5, pushing the bishop back, but also taking away the square e4 from the knight, which could have been used by the knight to attack the bishop and free the blockade. So here, white responds with bishop to e3, and now black exchanges both rooks, and then plays the pawn to b6. After this, white responds with queen to d3, queen to d7. White exchanges queens, and now knight to c3. Black responds with bishop to c6, and now king to f2. Coming back, knight to d5 here is very tempting, but this is not a very good move, because after bishop takes d5 and c takes d5, black can respond with king to e7, and now the pawn on d5 will be very hard to defend. If here white responds with pawn to g3, black will respond with knight to e7, attacking the pawn on d5. After pawn to d6, c takes d6, e takes d6, knight to d5, and now all black needs to do is move the king to e6 and pick up the pawn on d6 with the winning advantage. Coming back, if instead of moving the pawn to g3 here, white tries pawn to g4, well here, black can respond with knight to e7 again. After pawn to e6 check here, king to e8, where black is still a little bit better. So coming back to the game, instead of moving the knight to d5, which would be a mistake, white plays the correct move of king to f2. After this, black moved the king to f7. White respond pawn to g3, king to e6. And after bishop to e3, both players agreed to a draw. Both players' minor pieces have nowhere to go, and also with the bishop of opposite color endgame, there was no reason to continue playing. So even though this game ended up in a draw, it could have gone downhill for white very quickly if he wasn't proactive to stop black's plan by preventing him from trading his double-up pawn and freezing the queenside. And before I end this video, I want to show you another similar example that's not taken from an actual game, but is very instructive to highlight the effectiveness of blocking a passed pawn. And here's another similar example where white has a protected passed pawn that's frozen, being blocked by the opponent's knight. If we analyze this position, we could see that both the king side and the queen side are blocked, and the only active play would be via the d file. The protected passed pawn on e5 is moreover traitor, and we can clearly see this if we take it off the board. If we analyze this position now, white wins immediately. We could see that all his pieces become extremely active. White controls the e file, being tripled up with the two rooks and the queen. The bishop on b2 is extremely active, attacking black's king and controlling the a1 to h8 diagonal. And even the knight on f3 could jump on the square e5 if it needs to put pressure on the enemy king. With the pawn back on e5, this totally changes the game. It would really be nice if you could offer that pawn on e5 to your opponent to put it back in the box. However, in this current position, all that white's got is maybe rook to d1 to fight for the d file. But after black exchanges rooks, rook takes d1, queen takes d1, rook to d8, rook to d3, rook takes d3, queen takes d3, and queen to d8, there's nothing that both players can fight for and can simply accept the draw. So thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for the next video where we're going to take a look at the third type of useless passed pawn, where the passed pawn is a tremendous weakness. Thank you and have a great day. Want to reach master level chess? I encourage you to visit my website masterchess.com, where you will be able to engage in a free beginner to master interactive course. All you have to do is go to masterchess.com, click on beginner to master course, choose your rating category and what lessons you want to study, watch the video on those lessons, and then practice against the computer. Thank you for watching and have a great day.